Hi, and welcome to the CustomerGauge Net Promoter Benchmark 2016 survey. My name's Adam Dorrell, I'm the CEO of CustomerGauge. I'm here with
Jørgen or Christensen.
And on the other line, at the end of the line in Burlington, just outside Boston in the US, we've got Ian Luck, who's on mute at the moment, is probably coordinating this. He was in charge of doing the marketing for CustomerGauge and the whole NPS Benchmarks project that we had here. So without further ado, we're going to go through this. We're going to try and give you some information on the projects as we went through this. Pretty excited about this whole thing. It was really quite a big project that we got going off here.
Yes, I actually think we should start by thanking all the attendees at the meeting for joining us now, but also for, I think most of you have actually answered the survey.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of really exciting information to broadcast today.
I think so, yeah. You and I both have been really committed to this whole open source of Net Promoter. I followed in the footsteps of Fred Reichert when he said Net Promoter is really for everyone. And so we started doing Net Promoter News back since 2009, I think. We started up the site NPSbenchmarks.com to encourage people to share their results. That was in 2014. We've now got several hundred, I think more than 600 scores up there. And we've also been setting open standards on reporting and data, which I'm really proud of. That's for me the big promise of Net Promoter as we go forward. But anyway, the background to this survey, right? We saw a lot of interest in Net Promoter benchmarks, didn't we?
Yes, we actually get a lot of visits on that site. There's really a lot of interest in finding out how people are performing on their Net Promoter programs. Well, we thought that we needed more information.
I agree. We just had one number on there, which was the Net Promoter score. And that doesn't really tell the whole picture, does it?
No, definitely not. No.
So I think that was what we really felt. We really want to know what were the drivers behind what made a successful and good score. That's why we started to do this. And you remember last year, 2015, we did a small survey,
yes,
which really was the lead into this. We wanted to find out what people were doing right or what they thought was right in their Net Promoter program, and that's really what led to this. And so I'm really proud to say that we believe it's the biggest ever industry survey. We invited more than 12,000 industry leaders to join. That were names that we mainly got from the NPS benchmark sites. And we got more than 600 responses, 642.
Yes.
We'll dive into the demographics soon, but again, just want to reiterate, this is a not-for-profit program. We're all about sharing on this. So everyone who participates will get a full breakdown. This is just really a taster of it. And again, what I also want to say is we're doing it in two parts. So there's a lot to digest. So do you want to talk about how we're breaking down the two parts?
Yes. First, we're going to talk a bit about the demographics, who actually participated, and then we're going to spend a little time on how you actually rate your own program. And that's actually quite interesting, a lot more than we anticipated. There's some of the mechanics of a program that we're going to talk about, the frequency of how much you ask clients, the response rates, and also, how mature your Net Promoter program is. We're also going to show a little bit about NPS benchmarks today. And then we have a part 2 coming up soon, June the 3rd. Where we're going to go more into closed loop analysis, retention, return on investment in a program. So more of the financial sides, and you say what we normally call the more mature programs.
I agree. So what we're going to talk about today is part 1, the mechanics of this. And we'd like to then get everybody back in a couple of weeks to talk about the business impact. That's, I think, for us, the most interesting thing to see what you can get out of it. So here are some of the takeaways that we thought. This is in part 1. So there were 5 takeaways we took from this. We thought that the industry could do better in the sense that the Net Promoter score of Net Promoter in these industries was 34. We'll talk about why that in a second. But when we asked, the first question was actually, how do you rate your own program? Would you recommend it to a colleague? And so those of you who know Net Promoter will understand that this is broken down into several areas. About half of the responses were promoters. They gave a 9 or a 10. But a significant amount, 20%, were detractors. And so we've taken those two communities and split them as we go through these things. But the main frustrations are key, no buying internally, internal communication, lots of manual work. Jørgen, any comments on these?
No, not to this
Together. Okay, so who loves NPS? We'll also talk about the sort of companies that really like doing NPS, and I think that might surprise you a bit. There's a few good learnings from this stage. Number 3 is set simple targets. We really see a good correlation between companies that are setting targets and improving. Number 4, well, we talk about this a lot, don't we? Keep the survey short, just keep it to a few questions and do it often. And I think 5 on this one is really about the right focus. Focus on customer experience, but better to focus on return on investment and retention if you can.
Yes. It's not what the majority of respondents do, but we definitely see a correlation between the return on investment and how happy you are for your own program.
We'll talk about that much more in the business impact, but certainly the companies that are able to relate NPS to dollars or currency, they really succeed. All right, let's just talk about some of the demographics on this. I think we had a really good spread across the industry. I was really heartened by this. On this slide just shows the size of the companies. You can see a lot of responses from what we call the mega companies, but also a really good spread of vertical markets and geographies, wouldn't you say? What we're doing is we've mixed in the results here from B2B and B2C programs. You and I know that there's a difference between those.
Yes.
So it's sometimes difficult to tease out all of the learnings from this, especially on things like response, but we believe there's enough weight in here to do that, and as we go through the year, we'll do more analysis on this. Okay, here's the key slide. So not everyone's happy with their own programs. The NPS is 34 of this, and as we said, about half of the people were not happy with their own programs. So then what we did, right, is we divided this group into what we call NPS Leaders. We call them, these are the people that scored a 9 or a 10. These are the people that would recommend their program, and we believe that these people are showing the best tendencies, and you can really see good correlation between return on investment and some of the other things. The other side of it we call NPS Laggards. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's. I think they're actually. I was surprised by the amount. Normally you would say if you work with Net Promoter, you would at least try to promote your own program. But we got a lot of honest answers from clients, and 17% of them were definitely not recommending them. We even got 2 that scored their own program a 0.
Yeah.
So it's there's definitely some learnings from this, but we'll get them later on the coming slides.
Okay. Do you also want to talk a little bit about the quality of the results? I mean, we talk about the demographics. Do you think people scored themselves highly or low? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, we actually asked some people that are, some of the gurus in the industry, and they were a bit surprised by some of the results, that they thought they were very positive. But the people we asked are Net Promoter practitioners. They're not end consumers or businesses that are being asked to recommend their vendors. So I think, of course, they're biased towards that we ask companies that are actually doing Net Promoter. There are also a lot of companies out there that are not doing Net Promoter. Yeah. So if you're looking for just a Net Promoter benchmark, I don't think you'll get it from this. We'll show it anyway, but I think it's still interesting because you want to compare not to all the companies that are not doing Net Promoter, but basically to the companies that are doing Net Promoter.
I agree. It is about the drivers of success.
Yes.
So let's dive into this. I think this is perhaps some of the most interesting results that we've got. That what we call internal alignment is key to success. I mean, you and I know anecdotally that if the CEO has a good buy-in, the program's likely to be a success. But even I was surprised to see that this was the #1 indicator.
Yes.
And it really seems that there's such a strong correlation between the fact that if your executives buy into this, your program will be a success.
Yes.
And we'll see what the negative side of it. The next one is linked to that, but not exactly the same, which is about empowerment to change. So it's about the connection between the vision at the top and the ability for frontline staff to make changes, I think. That seems to me to be absolutely linked. Again, targets is a very valuable thing. We also see that having a good and efficient delivery system is important. maybe not the most critical success factor, but the number one thing is make sure that you've got buy-in from the top. And the flip side of that is what happens when these are the detractors who are reporting, and the point at the bottom of the screen, which is the largest one here, is that when there are poor understanding of the goals throughout the company, or people don't see a strategic change, these are indicators of failure. These are the biggest causes of dissatisfaction on this. And I think this is really, I think, one of the big takeaways on this. If you are struggling to roll out a net promoter program, you really need the support of the CEO. Yeah, we've even seen it in I think even our own careers, when the management changes at the top, commitment changes, everything changes on this. But in the with the successful clients that we've seen, there's a red thread that runs through it, and that is we put the customer first, and we believe in retention revenue. Net promoter is part of that.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to more details on this. I thought this was, in a way, this is a fun slide. I was also really surprised to see this, that small companies have a much higher internal net promoter score than lower ones. So again, just to reiterate, this is how they rate their own program. But it's much higher. So we've seen the mega companies rating it 12. How is that possible?
Yeah, it's definitely a surprise, right? But when we saw it first, we would think, the large companies, they invest heavily in their net promoter programs and should probably be the first to recommend their own programs. Yeah. But it turned out differently. I think the reason we added that at the top is probably that the small companies, it's much easier to enforce change in those, right? Yeah. It's much easier to get the executive buy-in.
No bureaucracy.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's probably the reason, though we don't really know it, but it is definitely a pattern that you see the big difference between a score of 61 and 12.
Well, I think it's interesting to see as we go to part 2. We're not going to do that today, but we've seen some early results that the cost of some of these programs of the big companies is huge.
Yes.
That's a big driver of dissatisfaction. So that's an interesting thing. Let's drill down a bit more. I thought this was also interesting, but maybe it is also related to the size of the sample. B2B companies seem to rate their programs much higher than B2C.
Yes.
Again, I think that might be to do with closer connection to the clients and the ability to do more things quickly related to it. Again, there's some interesting stuff in here, but this is about how each industry rated their own program. And business services were the highest. Again, I would guess that's largely to do with a strong connection with clients. You say strong B2B. Yes, and I think, in a way, it's a sort of a funny outlier here, but public administration is negative 20. They really I'm guessing I can't get anything done in government sectors and that sort of thing. Okay, so I think this leads us into why people do their programs. So number one result was to improve customer experience.
Yes.
Number 2, increase customer retention, putting a revenue on that. It's interesting, only 20% of people are doing that. But I want to show you something interesting here, Jørgen. If you look at how people rate their own programs, the highest rated reason to do this, or the people who are most satisfied, are when they have retention as a driver. Any thoughts on that? Why that is? Why do you think that drives most most promoters?
Well, I think it's because we all love a good customer experience, and I think a lot of companies really challenge themselves of delivering wow experiences for good reasons, right? This is what we've all been told, that we need to stand out through the experiences we deliver to customers. But I think if you need to keep the executive buy-in to a program, it has to add something to the long-term shareholder value. It needs to create some kind of financial result. So actually being able to link your Net Promoter Program to retention and the financial elements of keeping your clients loyal, making more money on them, I think it's a prerequisite.
I also think that's what keeps it sticky at the board level. And that's why you get that buy-in. There's a virtuous circle that goes on here. The companies that can really show a link between revenue, again, it feeds more into the business impact. But having a goal to the program really works. And again, we see the negative, or the things that score lower, are when you don't have a goal. That certainly happens. or when you're trying to do some operational improvement or, dare I say, compliance.
Yes.
We have to do it because we have to report it. It's not a driver of success. And again, targets, like so many things in life, often drive success. And this, I think, is really a great positive driver on this, that program promoters are much more into having a target. So the laggards, a third of them don't have a target. And I think that again, if you don't have a target to go for, how are you going to be fond of what you're doing in the program? So to me, it seems that program leaders set a target. It's really important to do this. Do you know what the target for improvement was on average throughout the year? We had some discussions about that.
Yeah, I think it was around 7%.
Yeah,
a year.
I did a calculation on an average.
Yes.
Well, it was a calculated average, so there's a very wide area of margin in that. But I would say an average of about 7% improvement points over the year was what people were aiming at.
Yes.
So half a point a month or something like that to improve the Net Promoter Score. Doesn't matter what it is really, but I think the point is have a target and really go for that. Right, this is probably fairly self-explanatory. Digital is king. Email invitations are out there, but we still see people doing it over the telephone. And my personal pet hate is automated over the telephone. I can't believe that in 2016 people are actually using IVRs to dial out and saying how satisfied you are with this service. But it still goes on, guys, and there's a proof, right? Again, I'm also surprised to see that human over the phone is so high on that. That correlates reasonably well. We do some other work with survey dissatisfaction. The one that really drives this is email.
Yes.
And 70% of the people are using that. So try to avoid that. I think from our personal experience, we see a higher percentage of customers using SMS, but maybe that's lost in the mix here. We've brought a couple of 3 slides together actually in this one slide here. When we looked at the average response numbers that people were giving to surveys, then we calculated the average of around 31%, which I've got to be honest, we thought was a bit optimistic.
Yeah.
Well, it's fairly in line with some of our B2B work. We see a 28% average from our own B2B work, and some clients are much higher. I mean, we see 40 or 50% from email. But again, the mix here is B2B and B2C, so it's difficult to see. But I'm particularly keen on this one, which is about using a metric I call reach, which is how many customers you actually reach out to ask a survey on, times response, which gives you coverage. And I found that 14% is really the average here. But again, there's a big delta between those who are program leaders, who are getting 16% coverage, and program laggards who are less than half that. So again, I think that's a big indicator of what an NPS leader does. They reach out to many people in the organization and they drive response up to give them coverage. Again, we've got some useful stats on here, vertical market, what are your coverage rates on that? More details in the full pack, but we just wanted to touch on that today. Oh, I love this one. Keep it short, which, by the way, should probably be a metaphor for this webinar. We're 20 minutes in. We will try and do up on this. But I was also interested to see that the majority are just using NPS in the service and keeping it to a very small number of questions. Half the companies we found using a maximum of 3. What is your takeaway on that? Is that NPS is becoming more mature, or these other metrics are popular? What's your view on this?
Well, I actually think the 3 at the top. One thing is NPS, which is clearly we ask people who do NPS, so of course they use NPS, right? But it was actually a bit of a surprise to me that there were so many using customer satisfaction, CSAT, but also the customer effort score, which was introduced not that many years ago. But they're typically used in transactional settings. So I think quite interesting actually that you see a lot of companies using these 2 other measurements as well. our metrics as well. So yeah, but yeah, as the chart shows, right, the net promoter score is definitely the most popular one.
And we also know that it's really hard to limit surveys based on our interaction with clients. Everybody wants to put an extra question on, but we found that NPS leaders are much better at keeping the survey short.
Yes.
And I think that's really a great takeaway, that if you want to have a world-class program, try and reduce as many additional questions as possible, make the survey short, you get response higher. It's another virtuous circle that we see that NPS leaders are doing.
Yeah.
Automated, well, it's one of those things that is an interesting thing. I think everybody would like an automated survey. We see program leaders have got a much higher degree of automation in terms of sending out stuff. But again, I think there's a big delta here between the leaders who are integrating results back into the wider CRM systems. And that I think is the mark of an NPS leader. Not perhaps so much in the CRM system, but bringing results to a wider audience within the company, getting more coverage. We'll see more of that in part 2, but that's an interesting thing. So again, something to strive for if you want to become an NPS leader. Make sure it's automatically triggered and bring the results back so everyone in the company can organize it. I thought this was, I think we were most surprised to see that such a low proportion of programs are automated.
Yes, that was a real surprise to me. Maybe it connects with the fact that a lot of companies still use IVR and humans, though even the IVR is automated to some extent. So, but that was a big surprise to me.
I agree. If you're listening to this and think that these programs cannot be automated, there are many ways of doing this. And integration really works, and to make this happen, that is one of the points about making a net promoter sticky in an organization, to make it frictionless, to make it just automated. That's really what we see. We can talk about some other things about closing the loop as well, which should be totally automated as well, but that's really for part 2. Finally, from this one, this is, I put rather flippantly on this, everybody loves a benchmark. Yes. So what we did is we put a question in there. We said, what is your net promoter score? Actually, we asked them to put it in ranges. So it's not an exact one. We did some calculated averages on this. I think this is a nice chart. It kind of bears out everything else that we do. There's nothing really out of the ordinary in this. But we found out from our 640 respondents that their overall average NPS was 44. And we saw it higher in certain other businesses like retail, trade, and some B2B ones. Interestingly, but perhaps not surprisingly, telecommunications are further down the list. We all know there's some bad things in those areas. Also, given some of the results that I've seen, I was surprised to see that some finance companies or insurance was so high. But again, there was a widespread of different companies in that, so it is just an average.
Yes, but again, this is where the comment that I gave in the beginning, we ask NPS practitioners, so it's really all of you that answered the survey. You're doing that promoter, you probably worked with it for some years, and of course your results have improved over time. So I think these numbers look very high. Very positive in that sense, but it probably does not reflect the entire market, because not everybody is doing net promoter.
I agree. So I'm going to try and pull the strings together on this about what makes a successful NPS program, and do chip in when you need to. But the biggest takeaway for me, although it's the second box on here, was that if you get buy-in from the top, that's the key indicator to success for your program. If you cannot get the whole company aligned behind it, it's difficult to see how your NPS program will be a success. Would you agree with that one?
Yes.
Yeah. I like the fact about having retention as the goal. I think that for me really works. I'm biased on this one because I always like to see a good return on investment from anything that I deal with. But I think that is, if your goal is to really make your client's sticky, that's the way to do it. And we have a term for this, don't we? Yeah, we call it monetized net promoter.
Yes.
It's all about being able to track everything that you do from this. Box 3 is all about automation and frequency, and this is just about repetition and ease of use. What we know is when you automate programs, they're much more consistent, aren't they?
Yes.
So you can do much better comparison on these ones. We spoke about short surveys, 50% keep it to three questions or less, so that's a really good tip there. Try and get higher coverage as much as you can. So again, NPS leaders have a much higher response. They're above 33% and they have a higher reach. So on average, their coverage is 16%. But yours may be less. Just try and don't forget that you need to reach as many customers as well as get your response rate up.
I would like to add that, especially in B2B, that it's very important that your reach is high, because there's a lot of people that might impact the future buying decisions, and you basically need to survey all of them. So just surveying the one person that you normally talk to in a company will only give you a fraction of how loyal that company is towards you. So really think about how many people you survey in a B2B context.
I really agree, and that leads back into some of the other things we were saying about using email or SMS. It's such a low-cost way of reaching people that there's no excuse why you can't touch anybody. Net promoter solutions are not expensive to implement, and so reaching a higher performance, percentage of the company seems to be really good. An NPS goal, again, that seems to be a no-brainer.
Yes.
It's not so much setting an absolute goal, is it? But it's an improvement goal.
Yeah.
And again, email, don't phone is the right way of doing this. As I said, in the next part, we'll talk a lot more about how successful NPS leaders are closing the loop. One of the big clues is closing the loop on time, actually. Communicating back to customers is an amazingly high indicator of success, and we would really like to show you how effective that is. Again, I like to talk about retention and measuring ROI. We've even got some things in there about bonusing staff, actually, and how, if we're able to do this, about how much people actually spend on their programs, which is, I think, makes for eye-opening reading. Any other points on that, on part 1, Jørgen, that you want to comment on?
No, I think we covered all of it. So.
Okay, well, with that, why don't we go to some questions? I'm certain we've got some questions from our audience. I believe we've got more than 100 people on this webinar, so I'd be surprised if we don't have any. Ian, I don't know if you've been able to collect any questions on there, and in the event that we can't hear you, would you be able to type the questions either on Skype to me or put them in the box?
Hey, can you guys hear me?
All right, well, while we wait for Ian to do that. So again, Jørgen, were there any big surprises about the survey that you took? What was your biggest takeaway from this?
Well, my first big takeaway was actually how many people wanted to participate in the survey. I have to say that there was such a huge interest in this. We got so many really awesome comments from people thanking us for actually doing the work. Very interested in the results. Want to compare their programs to peers in their own industries. So I think that was my first really.
I agree. I've got to be honest. I thought we'd get 150, maybe 200 responses.
Yes.
We hit 642 in pretty short order. Yeah. To me, it really seems that there's a lot of interest in people getting questions, getting answers to questions on this. I'm really pleased that we did that. I'm delighted to share it. Okay, we've got a question here from Melanie who says, what does ACSI and UKCSI stand for? You actually asked to put in that in the survey, so can you comment on those?
It's the American Customer Service Index, I think. It's before NPS was invented, there were in US a satisfaction index, ACSI, that was commonly used, and I think the companies that did that were some of the companies that were criticizing NPS the most in the beginning.
Yeah.
But they have been doing a lot of work. There's been some articles about that their score is just as good as NPS, which I actually believe is true. The only thing is you can't really do it yourself. You need somebody else to do it on your behalf. Yeah. For which reason I just think it's doomed to fail in the future. But we also saw that very few people were doing that. It had a sister in UK called the UK CSI.
Customer Satisfaction Index.
Customer Satisfaction Index,
yeah.
Yes. So that's the answer to that.
I mean, it's interesting to see that there are other metrics out there. But again, one of the things I really like about Net Promoter is it's open and we're able to benchmark on it. Yeah. In my long 30-year marketing career, we never had anything that we could benchmark before. I really think this is a breakthrough, actually. We're able to see how to compare things between industries, but more importantly, how to get there. This is really a blueprint on how to get success in that area.
Yes.
Next question. Scores by industry, what time frames does that cover?
12 months.
Oh, there you go, that's the answer.
Yeah.
So we tried to get the 12-month score for the industry. I think that's what most people would quote.
Yes.
Is that some good best practice, just while we're talking about this now? If somebody quotes a Net Promoter Score, in a sense it's a snapshot in time. I mean, to me the answer is you should always mention the time period, but in the survey we asked them, what is it over the average over the last 12 months? So that's it. Oh, okay, I'm going to let you answer this one, Jørgen. I'm going to read it out. Michelle says we've just implemented Net Promoter just in 4 months, 4 months ago. When would be a good time to set a Net Promoter goal? Actually, I'm just going to interject here and say that we asked people how long they've been running their program for, and the average time was 2.5 years. Yes. I remember it. It's in part 2, but some interesting stuff. So, when do you start setting a goal?
Well, it depends on when you start doing Net Promoter now. If you started doing Net Promoter 4 months ago, maybe you got a good coverage of your customer base already, and you might actually start setting goals from mid 2016.
Yeah.
But what we normally see is that most companies work from 1st of January to end of December, and they set targets for the year. Yeah. So when would be a good time? I think it depends. We might set a pre-target for the second half of 16, but I would definitely say 17, if you've been running it for a year, then at least the time is right to set a target.
Yeah, again, if we just take the survey results here, it's difficult to tell an answer from that. All we've got is the number that people have put in there. So we know that the average is about 7 points of improvement a year. Yeah. I think it varies. I think on this call we shouldn't speculate on that too much, but it's running it for a year seems sensible. Next question. This is from Marcy, could be. What are companies doing to positively affect the response rate if they're struggling with this? And can we get a copy of the slides? Well, first of all, we'll take the last one. Yes, of course, you're going to get a copy of these slides. If you took part in the survey, by the way, you get the full deck, which we're going to be sending out later on today, I believe. And there'll also be digests of this available free of charge. So we hope we can do this. But this is available free of charge for everybody as we finish the call. The first part is how are companies positively affecting response rate? We didn't have it in the survey, but we can talk about some of our own experience here. Do you just want to give a few pointers about how people can influence that?
Yeah, there's a lot of ways, right? First of all, I think it depends on whether you work in B2C or in B2B. So let's take B2C first.
Yeah.
I think it's very much about how you survey, how appealing your email or your SMS looks. I think SMSs have certain limitations, but I really think it's about how appealing you make it look. And then also the survey has to look nice. I have to say, if you limit yourself to I think it was a recommendation mentioned, that you have 3 questions at most, you will get higher response rates. So if you're asking 20 questions, we know from research and from our own experiences that people get tired. They grow tired during the survey, and the last questions, they try to skip them. basically.
Okay.
So whatever score they indicate or whatever answer they give, you can't really rely on it. So really trying to limit the survey. The next thing you can do is that you can close the loop.
Yeah, agree. Because that affects the next time you do it. Yeah.
And in B2C, you close the loop. How? Well, first of all, you can of course call your customers, right, if they want to be called up. But you can also email them. Right? If you email them with the survey, you can email them back. You can say thank you for participating, but you can also tell them that you listened and what you learned and what you want to do. And when people get that kind of feedback, they're very inclined to answer next time. Okay. So that's how you grow your response rates over time.
We've got some great resources on the CustomerGauge website actually about how to drive response up. There's like 10-point plan that we've got, and there's definitely things you can do on that. I'm just conscious of the time actually. I wanted to try and limit this to about half an hour. So we've got the last question from Laura. Let's try and take this as the last one because this is quite good. Laura says, what do you think is an acceptable NPS score? I see the average is 44. Yeah, do you want to? I've got a great answer for that. But
you take the answer. They have a great one.
Okay. Well, my answer is that there's no such thing as an acceptable NPS score. It's whatever your company feels is right. We see all sorts of industries, even identical companies. They have a different score and in different countries. The point about what you do with a Net Promoter Score is you take the score and you improve it. And that's really what this whole thing is about. You understand your drivers about why your clients give you that score, and then you improve. Yeah. And I think that this is really the right thing to do. The whole point about NPS benchmarks with the number on is misleading in a sense. They're great numbers to have, but it means nothing. You just need to explore what it works in your business. I think it's very difficult to benchmark one company against another. And that's what we preach here. The point is about understanding the drivers on this. By the way, our internal Net Promoter Score CustomerGauge, well, it hovers, it varies from each month, but it's around 50 something.
Yes.
55. So it's been up to 65 a few months ago, dipped below a bit, but that's what we do. That's what, to us, the acceptable score would be 80 plus. That's what we're working towards. We work really hard on that, but that's what we go for. One final question?
Yes, from Mail. Can you expand some on what constitutes automating NPS back into CRM?
Oh, this is a great one. Yeah, talk about how we do this.
Well, but what we typically see the request being is that first of all, you upload your data from a CRM system in order to send out surveys. This is how you automate it, right? But what we often see is that the people that want to use the scores, they want to use it in the system that they are most comfortable with, which is in many cases a CRM system. Yeah. It can be other types of systems, of course, but all the scores, the comments, the reasons that you get in your 3-question survey can actually be pushed back into a CRM system and made available. So for instance, if you do like the relationship survey, you try to measure the brand loyalty, how loyal people are to your company. That's really great information for an account manager, a customer success manager, or sales director to have in a CRM system. See all the information being available there.
I completely agree. It's about having that information to the frontline staff, especially when you do closed loop stuff. You want to be able to have it all on the screen together to say, oh man, I see you've just given us a score of 0 when you had a 10 before. Let's understand why, and then you can go through the information. And the other good point is reporting. You put everything in one place. You can look at trends. You can see what influences customers. You can do marketing to customers that give you a 10 or a 0.
Yes.
And that's one of the great reasons about putting it in there. So that's why you would do it. How you would do it, well, actually there are a number of products available on the market, including CustomerGauge, for example, that do integrations between the two. Commonly we see Salesforce, other ones might include Microsoft Dynamics, whatever, you name your favorite CRM system. And these days it's possible to get the data in and out.
Yes.
That's really if you're not doing that now, that really should be your future. Okay, well, I think we should close there. Any other final comments?
No, just a promise, right? I think we received more questions, so we'll also answer those.
Yeah, we'll try to do an
FAQ. Offline.
I'll try to do an FAQ. The recording will be available. We'll make sure that this is available to everybody afterwards. All we can say is we're really excited to go on this journey with everyone who participated. I think it's probably one of the most exciting projects that we've done up to this stage. I can't wait to talk about phase 2 of this, part 2. So we'll let you know, have the details of that. Thanks everybody for joining. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you.